Hey guys, it's Miss Munro here, coming to you from my house. I'm sorry for the kind of boring background and my headphone and the whole thing. I'm just trying to set up somewhere kind of neutral where the sound was better. Um, I'm delivering to you today lesson number 4 that Miss Longpre and I have been discussing. So Miss Longpre made 3 awesome videos already that we've posted. This one is going to be the 4th, and I'm going to do a couple more for next week. The format will be the same. We'll do a book talk, we'll do a little short text study of a poem or a short story, and then there'll be some quick write options for you guys to do. Before I get started, I just wanted to say I hope you're all doing well. This is, I think, week 4 of this isolation. It's obviously very challenging and weird sometimes, and I'm finding it hard too. One of the things I've noticed is I seem to be sleeping more and having really weird dreams. So that's something that I've heard is kind of common right now, as well as, anxiety is obviously a big one. But I find it's good to stay productive. I've been reading a lot because I've got, I guess, more time, and I'm going to be putting lots of different books online. If you guys have anything that you'd like to read in addition to what we're posting, just send me an email and I might be able to hook you up with something. Um, and one final reminder, if you don't have a device of your own, what we've heard is that the TDSB has been ordering iPads, which are really great for reading. So if you don't have any device, or if you'd maybe like to use an iPad for the next little while, be sure to check the Google Classroom or email me or Miss Longpre to get the link for the TDSB's survey. And if you fill it in, they're supposed to get back to you and get a device to you. Okay, so wishing you well, and I'm going to start with a book talk right now. So this is the book I read. I actually read this over the Christmas break, and I bought this at Indigo. When I saw the cover, I just thought it looked really cool. It really evoked Stranger Things and Stephen King, like 80s horror kind of vibe. And that's totally what it is. So if you like that kind of book, or if you've watched Stranger Things and you like retro 80s stuff, you'd probably really like this book. So what it's about, the genres that it falls into are horror, not exactly slasher horror or anything like that. There's just a little bit of a supernatural vibe to it. It's more of a mystery, like a supernatural mystery. And it's very much a coming of age novel. So it follows this young boy called Jake, and he's 12 years old when the main part of the story is taking place. And he's also kind of looking back on that time of his life when he's an adult. So it has a little bit of a framing device where the adult version of Jake is reminiscing and remembering some of these things that happened. But most of the story takes place in the 1980s, and it also takes place in Canada in Niagara Falls. So that was another thing that I thought was really cool. I haven't read that many books set in Niagara Falls, and it's a really interesting place. We mostly know it for the actual falls, the natural phenomenon of that. But there's so much more in that town. There's this real carnival kind of vibe to it. It's a weird tourist town. There's all kinds of strange things there. Lots of abandoned buildings, lots of huge hotels, amusements, things for tourists. It's just got a lot going on, and it's very unique. So I'm just going to read to you a little bit of the book from the beginning. So it starts out with a little bit of a flashback from the adult Jake, but I'm just going to read from page 4. This is a little bit more about the 80s, and it sets up a little bit about Jake. So here goes. As a boy, I believed in monsters. I was convinced that if I said Bloody Mary in front of a mirror, a hideous witch woman would reach through the glass with nails sharp as splinters. I considered it a fact that the devil lingered at shadowy crossroads and went to dance halls in disguise, where he'd ask the prettiest girl to dance and reel her across the floor while spectators stood terror-stricken at the sight of the devil's goatish shanks, until the girl fainted dead away and the unclean one vanished in a puff of brimstone. There was no falsehood I wouldn't swallow, no quilt of lies you couldn't drape over my all-too-gullible shoulders. But for a boy like me, chubby, freckled, awkward, growing up in a city where the erection of a new Kmart occasioned our mayor to announce, This marks a wondrous new chapter in our town's history. Imagination was my greatest asset, not to mention my defense against a foe worse than not to mention my defense against a foe worse than the most fearsome monster, loneliness. My ally against that foe was my Uncle Calvin. If I told him there was a bottomless pit in my basement, he'd say, "Tell me, Jake, is the air denser around the mouth of the pit than in the other areas of the basement?" Cocking an eyebrow, "Do ominous growling sounds emanate from this pit of yours?" Uncle C was the ideal nursemaid for my paranoid fantasies. His knowledge of urban legends and folklore was encyclopedic, with the added bonus that he seemed to consider most of it true. Okay, so I'll stop there. So this Uncle Calvin is the other main character in the story, and a lot of the story is about the relationship between Uncle Calvin and Jake, and it's a really nice relationship. The uncle's really strange. He runs this weird occult shop in Niagara Falls that sells like witchy and wizardy kind of things. No one ever goes into the store, but Jake spends a lot of time there with his uncle. And that's part of the mystery is, why is his uncle so weird? And what had happened to his uncle before the story begins? And that's part of what Jake is trying to figure out while spending the summer hanging out with his Uncle Calvin in Niagara Falls. So I just thought this book was really cool. I read it really fast in a couple of days. I couldn't put it down, and it's not super long either. As you can see, it's not a huge book. So again, this kind of falls into mystery. There's a little bit of horror to it, but I didn't find it that scary. My tolerance for horror is pretty high, but I considered it more of psychological type of feel. Um, I thought it was just a really interesting story. It's well written and it's set in Canada, which I liked as well. So if it sounds interesting to you, I encourage you to check it out. And again, it's called The Saturday Night Ghost Club, which is as well an awesome title. First of all, I put a piece of art behind me because I couldn't stand the blank wall anymore, and I'm sure you couldn't either. All right, so for the second part of this lesson, I'm going to read you guys a few poems by Langston Hughes, and he's one of my favorite poets. I'm not really sure why. I just keep returning to him over and over. And he worked mostly in the 1920s. So he was part of what was called the Harlem Renaissance. And in a nutshell, Harlem is a neighborhood in New York City. And in the 20s, which was literally 100 years ago, it became this huge center of art, literature, writing, intellectualism, and it was an explosion of African American or Black art. And Langston Hughes was a huge part of that. So he's quite a well-known poet, certainly one of the better known African American poets of that era. And I first came across his work to my knowledge, what I really remember was it was 10 years ago when I was first working at Mark Garneau, and I was teaching a grade 12 college English class, and we were made to read a play which I'd never read before, and it was called A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry, who's another Black artist. So she was a playwright that was based out of Chicago. And this play was so amazing. I just absolutely loved it. It was such a special experience reading that play for the first time with a small class of students. And interestingly enough, her play features one of the poems by Langston Hughes in the beginning, like it's the opening lines of the play before the actual play begins. So that's the poem that I'd like to share with you. It's very short, and I'm also going to read to you a couple of his other well-known poems. He did write some longer works as well. I'm literally just sharing three very short poems with you. The first one is called Harlem. The second one is called Dream Dust, and the third one is just called Dreams. So there's obviously a theme here that you'll see. We'll discuss that theme after I've read the poems to you. Okay.
Harlem, a poem by Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat? Or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? Dream Dust by Langston Hughes. Gather out of stardust, earth dust, cloud dust, and splinters of hail, one handful of dream dust, not for sale. Dreams by Langston Hughes. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field frozen with snow.
Hi. Okay, so I've moved again to a different room, just for variety, you know. So those are three short poems by Hughes, and I really wanted to focus on the idea of dreams. I picked those three in particular, not only because of their length, which is short, but he keeps talking about this idea of dreams, and I'm not talking about dreams that you have when you're asleep. Instead, what Hughes is referring to is the idea of not giving up on your goals and your ambitions. He lived in a time of segregation in the United States when you had things like black and white schools, when you weren't allowed to sit in the same area of a restaurant or be in the same hospital or ride the bus and sit next to people who were of different races. That was the reality that Langston Hughes was living in. So a lot of his poetry and his writing was about equality, and he really fought for and was an activist for equal rights, specifically about racial segregation and the right to vote. He never gave up on that dream, and he lived until 1967, so he did actually get to see his dream realized. The Civil Rights Act in the United States, which outlawed racial discrimination of the type that I was referring to before, was passed in 1964. So Langston Hughes got to see that dream of his realized. It doesn't mean that it was that easy or that everything was fine after that, but it was something that he cared a lot about, that was very important to him, and that he fought for throughout his life. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this idea is because right now, as you all are well aware, we're living through a pandemic, and a lot of our dreams and goals and ambitions have been put on hold. As he talks about in his poem Harlem, our dreams have been deferred. They're not the same dreams that he was referring to, but we all have our own dreams and ambitions, and it's really difficult right now to not know what's going to happen to those dreams, to not know if we're going to be able to realize them in the way that we had imagined. And that's something that I think is good to think about, and it's good to talk about, and obviously it might be good to write about. So on this idea of dreams, I was thinking of a couple of quick write options. One would be more creative, and the other can be just more of a personal response, like a diary entry. So we'll start with that one. I just wanted to think about our dreams and our ambitions, like I was mentioning before. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff that maybe we can't do right now. You know, we can't really go out that much except for perhaps a short walk or going to get some necessities. But there's still a lot of things that we're able to do that maybe we didn't realize that we liked, or things that we weren't necessarily able to do before because maybe we didn't have time. So, for this personal response, I'd like you guys to think about what's something like a dream or just a goal, something that you would like to do this week. So this would be something that you can do, probably around the house. What's a dream or goal or ambition that you have for the next week? Something you'd really like to try or accomplish or maybe finish. It doesn't have to be anything serious. It could be, you know, I want to read a book with my younger sibling, or I'd like to cook a meal with my mom, or, you know, I need to finish folding that laundry, or I'm just going to sleep more because I haven't been sleeping that well. What's something that you'd like to do this week that you think would be beneficial for you? Um, and then I'd like you to write down, if you can, what would be your number one dream? What would you want to do when we finally get out of here? So when this is over and we get to go outside and everything goes back to normal, what is your number one dream? What's the thing that you want to do the most, that you're going to be rushing out to plan and do as soon as you can? And then finally, if you're able to, I'd like you to think about what's a long-term goal that you have. When we go back to school, for example, what do you want next year to look like? What's a dream that you have, for grade 11? What's a dream that you have for 2020 or 2021 or even beyond? What's one of your big dreams and big goals that you'd like to share with us? So that would be option number one. Okay, so for option number two, I was thinking of a more creative kind of idea. If any one of you likes to write poetry, the poems that Langston Hughes wrote here that I shared with you, they're quite short, and I find that the structure of them is pretty easy to imitate. For example, in his poem Dreams, which has the repeating refrain of hold fast to dreams for when dreams blank, life is a something, something, something. So he uses just a metaphor, a simple metaphor that's quite vivid. So he talks about life is a broken winged bird, or life is a barren field frozen with snow. They're really simple images, but they're so vivid. Like I can picture them in my mind so easily. That snow covered field where it's so quiet and you can't really hear or see anything, and yet it's so full as well. So that's what I really like about that poem. Dream Dust as well, where he talks about earth dust and cloud dust. And out of all that, you grab that one thing that you just really want to hold on to. I think that those poems that he wrote, because they're short, they're easy to imitate. I'd like you to give it a try. If you want to try and write a poem like Langston Hughes, you can make it on the subject of dreams if you want, or you can try and imitate his style. You might want to use a metaphor, like he did in the Dreams poem, where he talks about life as a broken winged bird, life is a barren field frozen with snow. Perhaps think of what would life be like for you? What are some metaphors or similes that you might be able to use there and imitate the style of that poem? So let's give ourselves about 5 minutes to try to do one of these entries. You can either do sort of a nonfiction personal response where you can write whatever comes to mind in terms of your own dreams for now and the future. Or if you want to try something more challenging, try and write a poem about dreams, or try to write a poem in the style of Langston Hughes and see what you come up with. Okay, so let's take 5 minutes and then I'll share a little bit about what I've been able to come up with. Okay, so I decided to try to imitate Langston Hughes' style. I wrote two. One is kind of serious, well, not too serious, but more serious than the other. So I'll start with the kind of silly one. Yesterday was Easter Sunday, and I baked a cake. Well, more accurately, my wife baked a cake, and I kind of just like supervised and pretended to help. But the cake was really good, and it was nice to have something, just fun to do with stuff that we had around. So instead of writing Dream Dust, I wrote Dream Cake. So I'm going to read it to you now. Dream Cake. Gather out of white flour, powdery white icing sugar, egg whites and vanilla, and sprinkles like raindrops. An afternoon of baking a cake that's all for us. And as of right now, we've eaten half the cake already. And I had cake for breakfast. So, when I'm talking about taking these little moments to have fun and find new things to do, sometimes it can be as simple as baking a cake and just eating it for the hell of it, because why not? So that was Dream Cake. Now, for the second poem, I tried to write a couple of verses to add to Hughes' poem Dreams. This is sort of his classic poem. It's so short, it's so simple, but the imagery of the broken winged bird and the barren field are so vivid that for me it's really memorable, and I really like it. So I decided to try and add a couple of verses to it using the same structure, and he has that famous repeating line of hold fast to dreams. What that means, when he says hold fast, what that actually means is hold tightly. Don't let go of your dreams, is what he's saying. That it's important to hold on to them and to cherish them. Because the broken winged bird and the barren field of snow represent regret, of things that we didn't do, things that perhaps we'd like to do. So I wrote a couple of verses. I was, I guess, kind of inspired a little bit by what's going on, with this pandemic. So I have two verses. I called it Dream Reversal. So we have one sort of serious verse and then one that's a little more positive. So here goes. Dream reversal. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams fade, life is an empty book, its pages decayed. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams repair, life begins again, and we will breathe summer air. Okay, so I think it's pretty obvious what that means. Let's not let ourselves fade away. Let's hold on to our dreams and goals and ambitions and remember that all that we're going through right now, one day it will end and we'll be outside again. We'll be able to see our friends and our family members, and we'll be able to breathe that fresh air, and we'll be able to have fun again. Okay, I should probably wrap up. So I've given you a book recommendation, Saturday Night Ghost Club. Be sure to check it out if you thought it sounded good. I'll be back next week with more book recommendations. And again, feel free to email me if there's anything that you're looking for, and I'll see if I can help you out. I hope that you've learned a little bit about Langston Hughes, who's one of the great American poets and a really important figure in the civil rights movement. We read a few of his very short poems, and you've done a Quickwrite imitating either the style of Langston Hughes or writing your own poem on, whatever structure and style you want about this idea of dreams, or you've written a personal response about some of your own personal dreams and goals and ambitions. So you should be seeing this on Thursday. I don't think we're posting another lesson this week, so we will see you next week with more activities and book recommendations. Be sure to send a message to me or Miss Longpray if you guys have any questions or concerns about anything, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as we can. All right, guys. I've enjoyed doing this lesson. I hope it wasn't too tedious for you. And we will see you real soon. All right, see you later. Bye.